who better to tell us if they are than the clean-cut, all-American boy? He's handsome, he's cute, and he's razor sharp. He's Jackson Hinkle, the political analyst and host of The Dive, and welcome returnee to the mother of all talk shows. Jackson, are the polls right? Are the Democrats headed for defeat?
Yeah, I mean, assuming that we have a fair and free election, I think that the Democrats are headed for a pretty terrible wake-up call come that Tuesday. It's going to be bad. We know that the American public is suffering right now when it comes to bread and butter issues, when it comes to inflation, the economy, crime in major cities, for example. And all the while, the Democratic Party is doing nothing to try and help contain these issues or take a course of action that might address these issues. They're sending $60 billion to Ukraine, as we all know, and they're currently preparing to send another $50 billion or more over to Ukraine, despite the fact that the American public is done with Ukraine. And they're trying to also say that the problems that the American public is witnessing and living each and every day don't exist. I saw Joy-Ann Reid go out on MSNBC just this week, and she said that the Republicans are engaging in an election front of trying to encourage or educate the American public as to what inflation is, because average Americans didn't use the term inflation, presumably before the Republicans launched their midterm election campaign. So it's just really incredible to see what they're doing and the fact that they are not addressing any of the problems that average Americans are facing.
Well, their election platform seems to be, let's send more and more of America's money to a place called Ukraine that virtually no American could identify on a map. About January 6th, which was a storm in a teacup, it would have been a quiet afternoon on the streets of Paris with the yellow vests on the street and so on. And Donald Trump, the spectre of Donald Trump, that's their election platform. Nothing about prices, nothing about jobs, nothing about rents, about student debt, about the crises, multiple crises on all kinds of issues that the American public faces. Who's advising these people, Jackson?
The people advising the Democratic Party are the same people who are, they're wheeling Joe Biden out to have his morning cereal. These people, they don't know what is good for the future of this country because they are not living the lives of average Americans. They simply are so out of touch that they don't even understand what this country is facing right now. And they're also the ones that are pushing the propaganda that free speech is bad, that the right to bear arms is uniquely evil, that the 1776 revolution was like an anti-American project that we should all hate. As Americans, this is the fabric of what we see our country to be. And these people, the globalists, are trying to unravel this fabric, tear apart this country bit by bit. And that's their goal at the end of the day. That's their project. They are taking cue from the World Economic Forum and from Klaus Schwab, rather than listening to the concerns and the hardships of Americans all across the country who don't have any real jobs, who have lost the manufacturing base and the industrial base in this country at a time when China is lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and they're working on industrializing their country and helping people in rural communities and offering to the rest of the world to join their Belt and Road Initiative, even the United States to join the Belt and Road Initiative. The United States is saying, no, we're going to entrap ourselves further in this hyper financialized market where everyone works a service job and everyone is working for Uber or Starbucks. And it's really just ruining our country.
Yeah, I mean, let's take that freedom of speech thing. I've lived so long, I've got to tell you, Jackson, that everything is reversed. The left that used to cry foul and decry the dogs of war of the American military-industrial complex, of the FBI and the CIA. The left is now their greatest defenders. and exalters. And it's the people on the right that are opposing the endless feeding of war against Russia. I've lived so long that people on the left who used to cry out for freedom of speech and against the ability of media oligarchs to silence the public discourse, now being the greatest champions of censorship. So Musk comes along, for example, and says that he's going to reverse at least some of the anti-free speech policies of Twitter, the biggest of the public squares. Who's organizing the backlash? It's the so-called left, in conjunction with some of America's biggest corporations, who are now pulling their advertisements from Twitter. It's a funny old world, as Margaret Thatcher once said.
Yeah, well, I'm always of the mindset that I'll believe it when I see it. And I'd imagine you are as well. So Elon Musk, I think that he's going to try to make a difference. I do think he's earnest. Maybe he has mixed motives. I'm sure the Pentagon would be happy if every single person that's currently anonymously using Twitter is verifiable and identifiable and can be placed on a blacklist much easier than previously. And this whole Twitter verification process is going to help them in that effort. But I also think that there's benefits to this because you're going to effectively root out a lot of this troll behavior on Twitter, maybe take a step closer to freedom of speech on the internet. I'm hopeful. I have yet to see what's going to happen, but I don't really trust any of these people, any of these individuals in elite positions of power. I mean, you bring up the Republicans and how they are fighting back against this endless war, proxy war in Ukraine that we are really digging ourselves into right now. I remember a day, and it's not like they hide it. I mean, Barack Obama literally wrote about this in his autobiography. I remember a day when Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi were out giving speeches about how they were going to stop the funding of the war in Iraq and how it was the worst thing that we could have ever done as a country. So as with anything, with these people who are in positions of power, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not hopeful for Kevin McCarthy to actually stay true to his word about stopping funding for Ukraine. And I don't know what's going to happen with Elon Musk, but wishing for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to turn to the Republicans. I'm not a Trump supporter, and neither are you. Neither are most people, I suspect, who are regular viewers of this show. But Trump started far less trouble in the world, although he did start trouble. Fewer wars than the others that went before him. And he is actually the only one of the top-line political actors in the United States who is actually talking any sense about the war in Ukraine. How does Tuesday and its aftermath look for him, do you think?
I think it's looking really good for him moving forward. And I saw some reports that he's planning to potentially announce his bid for presidency very soon. I saw some reports indicating maybe around November 14th, but we have yet to see what he's going to do. But what I do think is going to happen is you are going to have this massive, power grab from people within the camp of Ron DeSantis, trying to take up the donors of Donald Trump, trying to take up the supporters of Donald Trump. And I think this is what we are going to see as the major power struggle in the 2024 elections. I don't think it's going to be Democrat versus Republican. I think it's going to be a fight within the Republican Party as to who is going to run this country. And yeah, like you said, I'm not a Trump fan. I support the MAGA base, and I think that they're great, and I think that they have good instincts, and I hope that they don't side with Ron DeSantis, because in my view, Ron DeSantis is the greatest evil that our country faces. I mean, he is a neoconservative to his core when it comes to these foreign policy issues, and he's trying to win over Trump supporters by being populist or traditional on domestic issues. But at the end of the day, we're headed towards World War III with either Russia or China or both. We are moving into this multipolar world. Increasingly, and we just saw this with China, with Xi Jinping and Olaf Scholz this week, the world is being sectioned off into these blocks yet again. And we need a leader who is going to be the least likely of all to take us further down that path of world war. Ron DeSantis is going to take us down that path. Trump, could he? Yes. But is he less likely than Ron DeSantis? I think so. And I think that's why there's so many people in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party that are very worried about him right now.
Finally, and I'm grateful for your time, Jackson, once upon a time, the Democratic Party was always rotten, as far as I'm concerned. I grew up under democratic wars being fought across the world, but there was always a section of the Democratic Party that you could look to and admire. I'm thinking of the Kennedys. I'm thinking of some others who were always, if you like, there was an anti-war rump in the Democratic Party. There was a pro-trade union rump in the Democratic Party. There was a pro-people section of the Democratic Party. They were always the minority, but they always existed. People like McCarthy and Kennedy and so on. Now it seems an undifferentiated mass of rottenness. I can't tell you how much I despise the Democratic Party. Am I going too far?
No, you're not going too far. It's a very accurate observation you make. And you're especially right when you bring up the likes of the Kennedys. I mean, there you have a family who, during John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, these individuals were maybe not necessarily anti-war, but they valued détente, they valued diplomatic relations, they valued trying to strive for peace. And they were up against very, very powerful actors like the Dulles brothers, for example. It seems as though today the power structure within the party has been entirely swamped by the ideology of Dulles brothers type figures, individuals that are beholden to the intelligence community, beholden to the State Department. Even today, we look at the State Department versus the Pentagon, because I feel like there is a little bit of a power dynamic between these two entities. And the Pentagon is more aligned with the Republican Party of today. The State Department is more aligned with the Democratic Party of today. The Pentagon, we're getting voices out of like Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who are calling for peace between Russia and Ukraine, not calling for war with China. We don't have any voices in the Democratic Party that value détente. And it's a very unique point in history. No other generation of American leaders would have been as pro-war, regardless of the outcome, as we're seeing today from the likes of Joe Biden, William Burns, Victoria Nuland, Antony Blinken, so on and so forth. And it's why I'm very worried about the future of my country.
Well, we had the squad, but they turned into the bomb squad.
I like that. That's true. It's true. I mean, and now you see there, I'm sure you've seen the videos of average Americans going out and confronting the squad at their rallies, at their speeches, at campaign events. People from their own districts that are taking off work to go and confront them and say, why are you funding World War III? Why are you taking us one step closer towards nuclear annihilation? And they have nothing to say, because if they were to answer honestly, they would have to tell the public that this is just what Nancy Pelosi wants. This is just what our Democratic donors want. And I can't go against them because they are not willing to challenge power. It's so sad, because I'm sure many believed that individuals like AOC were maybe going to provide a new path in the Democratic Party, an anti-war path, a peace economy, if you will, because that's what they campaigned on. But now they've just become rank tools of the establishment.
Jackson Hinkle, as always, great wisdom in one so young. Thank you for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. That's Jackson Hinkle, the host of The Dive. Do check out his work and follow him on social media.